So we thought, what if we make a completely privacy-safe solution for women without subscriptions? It's free for everyone. And that was what we set out to do. Very difficult task. We thought long and hard for a year and a half and explored various models. But I think we got something. And that's why our investors are super excited.
Hi, I'm Belden Mankus. Welcome to The Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way.
My guest today is Amber Vodego, CEO of 28X, a purpose-driven digital health company building privacy-first AI-powered tools to improve women's health. 28X is reimagining how health data is collected, protected, and used, while placing ethics and equity at the heart of innovation. Amber brings a wealth of experience from her previous venture, Health and Parenting, which launched the globally successful Pregnancy Plus app. Now, through 28X, she's setting out to build a platform that serves 100 million women worldwide without compromising their trust or their data. Amber, welcome to The Purposeful Strategist.
Thank you for having me and allowing me to share my story.
Not at all. Really glad to have you here. Just to set the scene, could you give us a sense of sort of where 28X is today? People, revenue, funding rounds, anything that helps anybody listening get a sense of where you are in the journey.
So we're hoping to launch the MVP in September this year in the UK. Then we will follow with the US in December, next year Germany, France, and then we scale over the next 2 to 3 years to over 100 countries. We've secured funding. That was a difficult task because we just didn't want any odd VC. We wanted people to invest in us because they believed that we could do better when it comes to women's health. So we're very lucky to have engaged with the Philips Foundation, an incredible foundation. Philips does a lot of good in healthcare all over the world, and they have access to 20,000 healthcare workers, also in lower middle income countries. And we found an amazing group of investors that, of course, they do want a return on their investment, but they're also investing based on return on mission. And finally, we have a full working prototype. We've user tested that with the Princess Diana Foundation and medical board who have reviewed all the screens. And we're preparing for launch in September. So super exciting.
Yeah, very exciting, very exciting. You used a term, and I suspect actually many people noting, and it was MVP. So maybe you just describe for a second what that is, in relationship to 28X and what it means about what might eventually be available.
So MVP stands for minimal viable product. So it's a first launch to a smaller group just to test a few presumptions that we made before you go into the full application, because there's always things that you thought would be brilliant, and then when it's in real life, it's perceived different, or you need to make alterations. And secondly, we are going to do some quite innovative tech, and we won't have everything ready in September, but we want to take the momentum and already give users as much access as possible from the earliest moment that we can give it to them. And then over the next year, we will roll out the product.
And it's very simplest. What does 28X do? If I'm a woman using it, how's my life better?
It's no different than any of the other commercial period trackers out there. So 69% of, I believe, the 18 to 28-year-olds, they all use a period tracker. It's a simple app that estimates when your next period is due. There's no hard science because we're humans. We're not an egg timer that can predict that exactly. If you're stressed or you're ill, your period is slightly off. So very convenient because women can then plan a little bit around that. In the old days, you had a paper calendar. Now women use an app. It's so popular that apps like Flow allegedly have 350 million women a year on their platform. That's a lot of women. And whilst women are in these environments, in these apps, they also get educated, and we plan to educate them on over 100 health topics. So that could be osteoporosis, heart health, diabetes, the HPV vaccine, but also things like cervical cancer or breast cancer. So it's a education platform on the back of a period tracker. And it's super educational for a large group of women.
And it's got a very broad remit through that around, I'll say women's health, but many of the issues you talked about there aren't uniquely women's issues. Some sounded like they were.
There are some generic health topics that we need to educate on, and there are some very specific women's health topics like PCOS and endometriosis, all complex names. But what we try to do is educate them in different reading levels. So I'm Dutch, hence my accent. The NHS is amazing. People often say the NHS is broken. I think the nation is broken. We're not looking after ourselves very well. We eat way too much sugar and do way too less exercise, which is incredibly hard. And it's difficult for NHS to keep up with a food industry that feeds us all this unhealthy stuff. And then the NHS needs to fix that on the issues that come out of there. But their content, for example, and the platform also are super rich in advice and education materials. But ultimately, these pages are built by taxpayers' money. And the issue we have is that the average reading level in the UK is 9 years old. So for most women and men, these pages are quite daunting or maybe even boring. So what they do is they flock to platforms like TikTok for their health advice. And that's where we don't want them to go. So we try to educate in clinically validated content, but in an entertaining way to keep users' attention. And every woman knows that you need to check your breast for lumps. Your teacher doesn't teach you that in the classroom as a young woman. I know very little GPs that have time to teach women how to check their breast for lumps. And your mother was never taught it, so how will she teach you? So again, that's one of the things that we integrate in our app. There's a 4-minute course just teaching you how to check your breast for lumps because someone needs to educate. And we think these platforms are brilliant at doing that because we can make really cool 4-minute courses that are entertaining and fun.
So 28X, clearly a real strong sense of purpose. I'd be interested to hear, how did that purpose crystallize? It seems like in some ways, a very logical follow-on from Pregnancy Plus, but equally, I can imagine there were lots of other things you could have done. So how did that come together? And then how's that purpose shaped your strategy?
It was interesting. It's a good question. Health and Parenting was a great success. Pregnancy Plus was a huge success. 150 million pregnant women to date have used the app. 2 million women a day on the platform. 70% of the first-time mums in the UK. That came with a big responsibility because I really felt as an app developer what I'm going to say to 2 million women a day. And it turns out if you say, please don't drink any alcohol while you're pregnant, that's a lot more healthy mums and babies. I exited the company to Philips, which was a very positive journey. I bootstrapped the company, which means that you never took any external investment. So we had 98% of the shares the moment we exited. So I was going to take it easy, look after the kids, play some tennis and retire. That's what tech entrepreneurs tend to do. Then I read a book called Moral Ambition by a Dutch historian. It's also translated in English. And it basically said the biggest waste of our generation is a waste of talent. Our cleverest minds are working to optimize TikTok feeds. Our mathematicians are improving Facebook algorithms while we should be working on cancer and climate change and obesity. And there I find myself with a lot of talents in women's health apps, enjoying a game of tennis. So I thought maybe I should give something back and build a company which has tech for good at the core. So that was what we started. So we looked at where can we make the biggest difference and where do my talents and the team's talents lie. And we thought, let's stay close to mobile apps, women's health. And the biggest apps in this space are period trackers. There's nothing bigger than period trackers. But there's an issue because loads of these period trackers are backed by commercial investors. And most of those large apps have picked up anywhere between 50 and 300 million of funding. That's a lot of money. That's not free money. These investors want to have 10 times or even 20 times their money back. So what happens is women get exploited quite often. So either the ways to earn money back is to share data or sell data in some cases, subscriptions in apps, and advertise products. And in either way, I felt women are exploited. So University of Cambridge did a research study on those commercial apps recently. And it just shows these apps are not always safe for women to use because their data gets shared. Sometimes you think you opt in or you don't. It's really difficult to see. So women have no idea. They just think I need this period tracker. They opt in and they actually don't know where their data goes and how it's used. Most of the time it's used for marketing purposes. It's not used to improve algorithms. And that's a dangerous space to be in. And then there's all these subscriptions, and we got used to those subscriptions. Lots of people can't afford those subscriptions. It's only the top layer of society that say, I'm fine with £5 or £10 a month for a subscription. But if you look at the 80-90% of society, they have no spare cash to pay for those subscriptions. So then all of a sudden, menstrual health and women's health is paywalled. So there's TikTok, which is free, which is clinically not very solid advice. Then there's the NHS, which I sometimes find a little bit daunting or boring, is not very entertaining. And then there's the commercial apps in the middle, and they charge you money. So there's no real good solution. So we thought, what if we make a completely privacy-safe solution for women without subscriptions? It's free for everyone. And that was what we set out to do. Very difficult task. We thought long and hard for a year and a half and explored various models. But I think we got something, and that's why our investors are super excited. We've got a lot of support from all over the world, from large organizations that really want to see a difference here.
You've a couple of times in your description used the pronoun we, which I often do, even though for me personally, a more accurate pronoun often would be I. So I'm curious who the we is for you.
We're trying to build the biggest women's health app on the planet. So there's a very large team. So not only have we got a lot of partnerships on content creation, for example. I've got a co-founder. He's also the CEO of a large media agency. Our CPO is incredible at compliance and regulation. Our chief medical officer was a gynecologist who worked years in the NHS, who really knows what the issues are from women. Then we have about 300 ambassadors. So in order to shape this product, I went on a mission to phone as many senior people as I knew in my network and asked them, how could you improve on this and how can you help? And that resulted in about 300 ambassadors of people that say, I love what you're doing. I'm happy to donate a few hours of my time, or any connections or any people I know I can introduce you to. And that has been amazing. And then there's the Philips Foundation, but there's also Patient Knows Best, a very close connection to Royal Colleges, Wellbeing of Women are very supportive, the Gates Foundation, Clinton Health we've been talking to. So it's the Case for Her in Sweden, the Sanitation and Hygiene Fund in Switzerland. There are so many amazing organizations, and they all want better solutions for women. And nobody likes the current paywalled subscription system that there is out there.
Yeah, as you're describing it, it sounds a bit more like a movement than a business.
It is.
But equally, I think there is a business at the heart of this somewhere. Maybe I shouldn't even say in the heart, because I suspect the heart's more the movement. But somewhere in there, I think you've got a business model. I think you have investors yourselves, and like you say, they want a return. So how does the money work now, and how might you see that developing over time?
It was one of the core questions, of course, how we're going to be sustainable if we want to do all this for good. Part of us operates like the Wikipedia model. So Wikipedia is completely free, amazing resource of content. Once a year, you get a message if you want to donate, voluntary. They pick up 165 million a year from those donations. Absolutely incredible. Then we have a very cool model for brands to come in that takes a bit longer to explain than on a podcast. But once you see it, I think you'll love what we're doing. It's a very cool feature that doesn't advertise you any products, works a little bit like the Snapchat AR lenses. It's a super cool module. Then we have options like you can order contraceptives through the app. It's free for the user and we will receive a kickback. We worked on the cost side. So one of the things you can do to be sustainable is to have less costs. So we thought, what if we want to scale to 100 million women in India? If you have cloud servers, that's incredibly expensive. So one of the things we did was we removed the entire backend. We have no cloud service at the backend. That's different than any other app out there. But it's liberating because we have no expensive database managers. We can't be hacked. We can never sell or share data because we simply don't have it. But we worked on a new tech stack that allows us to do everything you can normally do without us having cloud servers. So everything gets processed on device, and that really reduced the costs. And then finally, with our investors, I made a pledge on a lot of podcasts that we are predicted to make about 35 million EBITDA, so profits in year 5. I made a pledge, no matter what, I would never take more than 500K in dividends a year. That means that potentially we can then donate back 34.5 million every year. Because I don't believe that one individual should enrich themselves beyond certain levels, which is what happens in a lot of those other companies. So yes, I'd like a salary at some point. We're not taking any salaries at the moment, but at some point it would be nice to have some compensation, but it should always be limited. So the idea is that we're going to donate money back to research, free period products, education at school. We're going to support other women who start amazing women's health companies. To my investors, I've asked a soft pledge. So if someone invested 50K, I'll work as hard as I can to give you 5x back as quickly as I can, which means that they can get 250,000 back. But after that, I've asked them to then donate future profits beyond the 5x back to a foundation. The same I will do with 90% of my profits. I'll donate them back to the foundation. And then together we can decide within that foundation where to donate that money back to. So potentially we can donate tens of millions a year after year, back into the system rather than to a few investors. They don't have to do that. If these investors said, no, I just want 28x back, that's the name of our company, 28x, that's fine too. But I expect that most of our investors, the way we selected them, are really happy to help us support this mission and to donate money back into the system after they've had their return.
It sounds like you've got a sort of, I'll say, complicated set of things going on there. You've got, partnerships, you've got this sort of brand bit, you've got donations, you've got, how do you navigate through all of that? And how do you keep it from getting so complex you can't really tell what's going on?
I get that it sounds complicated, but for every single pillar, we thought long and hard how to simplify it. So brands, for example, we prefer to work with global brands that can support over like 20 countries. So as much as I like local companies that are big in the UK, if they're not also in Germany, France, and Indonesia, it's hard for us to scale. So I'd rather work with a brand that is global than local, because otherwise you have a sales house in every country. So again, here we try to reduce the cost. And we have very simple mechanisms of how they can sponsor that. Contraceptives, we use a plugin through a company called Evaro, with an also female founder. Incredible software she created. So it's a plugin that's very simple that we can add to our app. So it's you need to work clever. I'm not saying it's easy, but Pregnancy Plus wasn't easy either. It was over 100 countries and 25 languages. But with the right people, you can achieve a lot, but you have to simplify every process.
Clearly, it's a strategy that you've thought through very clearly, as you've said. Was that mostly you? Was that you plus this sort of chief medical officer and your CPO? Or was it you and an even bigger group, like as the strategy was coming together? Who would I be seeing there?
The people working quite closely on the product are experts at their level. So I'm an expert at scaling women's health apps on mobile. So we have the relationships with Google and Apple and the stores. But when it comes to design, I'm not a designer. So my CTO, he's a CEO of a large agency with amazing UI, UX designers. So he's leading that side. Our chief product officer is very experienced when it comes to compliance and regulation. So ISO certification, the ISO sandboxing, ORCA rating. So I know nothing about that. Content creation is a separate team. So we have all these expert teams. The actual strategy, a lot of it developed from the fact that initially I funded everything myself. When it's your own funding, you'll be slightly more careful of where you're spending that money. So I counted the other day, I pitched it to over 300 people last year. So I would ring someone in my network that was well connected in the NHS or was well connected with an influencer network or had amazing content on hormone health. I would tell the story, I would show the pitch deck, I say, this is what we're building. What do you think? How can you help? And the interesting bit there is after 300 times telling the same story, it felt like a theater performance occasionally because I had the same story and I always had to put in the same energy. But it was brilliant because people would come back and say, I like it, but have you thought about this? And then all of a sudden I thought, oh, that's a really good point. I haven't. The same was the name 28X. Came because we needed a universal name that was pronounceable and understandable in over 33 languages. So you're talking about like countries in the Middle East, but also Indonesia and Thai, and they all have different numbers and letters and spellings and meanings of words. So we couldn't have a general English word. So 28 is the days of your cycle. And then we added an X because my previous app was Pregnancy Plus. And then in these calls, people would say, oh, you chose the X because of the female chromosome. And I was like, no, but that's brilliant. Or someone would say, the X is the butterfly. And I said, no, but it's actually brilliant. So people would fill in the gaps.
That's great. Yeah.
Or they would say, I love your solution, but I work a lot in the Middle East. And did you know that the governments there would be very supportive because they no longer want their citizens' health data stored on Californian or European cloud servers? So your solution is brilliant for the Middle East, where women can browse in safety the topics and all the data stays locally. I never knew that was something that was important in those countries. So again and again, every time you pitch your story, and I recommend it to anyone starting a business, take a year, tell your story over and over again, and listen to the feedback because you don't know it all. And what also is a good question at the end of one of those half an hour pitches I would ask, who can you introduce me to that can really move the needle? And then someone said, well, the most senior person I know within the NHS or the most senior person I know in Google is this person. And then I would ask for an intro. And then I did the same pitch to that person and I asked the same question. And it's unbelievable how quickly you can get to very senior people worldwide.
One thing that strikes me in what you're doing there, you were kind of developing this strategy collaboratively. In those pitches, you were actually refining and thinking through and adding to this strategy as you went. You could have said, I've got these brilliant people, my CPO, and I'm going to get them all together and we're going to get in a room for 2 days and we're going to bash it all out. We're going to have the right strategy and then we're going to go out. That you instead said, no, I'm going to engage with a lot of people and hear lots of experts and take on board what they're saying. Is that a fair description or am I just romanticizing the whole thing?
No, it's both. It's both the team you work with, but you need external feedback. I believe it does come from most entrepreneurs and most business leaders, to be honest, are insecure overachievers. And I'm one of them. So you get super obsessed about getting it right. You get super obsessed about building the best product for your customer because the last thing you want is that it doesn't work and all this energy been put into it project that fails. So when you're employed and you get a salary every month, you can sit back, maybe not in every job. I mean, there's some jobs where you can't sit back, but there are a lot of jobs. We all know those jobs where you can sit back and say, I'm delivering what's asked for me. And at the end of the day, I go home and I'm enjoying family life. Nothing wrong with that. But in the case of an entrepreneur, when you put in your own money, you need to have either a little slight ADHD where you just don't want to stop and have endless energy, which I have, or you need to have this insecurity because that's the driver. There needs to be a driver to keep doing this because otherwise it's very tempting to go and work somewhere else and just take it slightly easier. Because the downside of this, it does eat into your social life, your family life, and again, it's a big task to balance that. It's not an easy thing to do.
You've got some pretty ambitious goals for 28X, and clearly the 100 million women is part of it. But beyond that, how do you define success? Particularly picking up some of those issues about the trade-offs around family life and all the rest of that. What success look like for you in this?
The definition of success changed throughout my career. I think success was first making a career, getting a better job title. Later on, it changed into wanting to pay off a mortgage. Success for me now is to make a difference in a small category to a lot of women. My biggest competitor is a period tracker that recently had 2 class action lawsuits, one in British Columbia and one in California for misuse of data. They're doing an excellent job in the fact that they've built an amazing period tracker. I think we can do better. So success is providing a solution for the 80%. That also means then be bigger than the biggest women's health app. When I built Pregnancy Plus, I always wanted to build a solution that was larger than Baby Center. Baby Center was the biggest pregnancy app in the stores. And What to Expect was another app. But they were filled with advertising. And I felt really bad for all these women that have this beautiful phase in their life where they're preparing for their firstborn, and all they get is adverts about what they should be buying. Again, the strategy was always, let's be bigger than Baby Center. It's a little bit silly, a bit childish, but it gives you a goal to work towards, because then you think we have a better solution. And I literally celebrated the day that we were bigger than Baby Center. And I do it again here because it's very simple. If we can be bigger than the biggest period tracker, then we can really make a change. And you're talking then about 100 million monthly active users. And that's a voice. If we get to that size, that's where I need a new strategy and I need lots of help. Because what are we going to say to 100 million women? That's a voice. On Twitter, or X now called, I believe there's only 200 million women a month. So you're talking about half the size of the female audience of Twitter. That's a large size. So it's a big responsibility that we have then. And we can launch products that never see the day of light because they don't have the marketing budgets. And we can maybe decide to advertise them for free. You can decide as a group with your investors to say, really believe in this product. They don't have the budget. What if we advertise this to 100 million women? We can make a bit of a change in the environmental impact, for example.
Mm-hmm. How do you decide what not to do?
That is a really good question. So yes, we have those guidelines and we decide with the team what we think is ethical and what is not. But it's really hard to put that in words. A good example was when I ran Pregnancy Plus, we were offered quite early on a partnership model for about 100,000 a year to advertise cellulite cream to pregnant women. In those days, there was a lot of money for us. It's always a lot of money. But I felt really bad about that because you're basically telling women cellulite is not a good look and it increases in pregnancy and you should do something about it. And here's a cream that costs £80. That is not the message you want to give because cream doesn't work. Cellulite is genetic. You can maybe drink a little bit more water or walk a bit more, but just accept your body. That's the message we want to say. Accept your body. You're doing something amazing. You're putting new life on the planet, which is a beautiful thing to do. And yes, you have some cellulite. So what? All these women have a little bit of cellulite and it's okay. That's the message. So we didn't take the money. However, if we were VC backed, so venture capital backed, large commercial investors, which at the time we didn't have, but say we did have them, I don't think we could have pushed back on those decisions because they want their return. So you need to be super careful who you invite on your cap table as investors, because you will have lots of discussions about what you will and won't do. And you need a group of well-minded people that can make ethical decisions. I think if you invite 10 or 15 of those investors and say, this is the dilemma we have, together, I think we can make really good decisions. And you can't describe everything in a document. But we will put our mission guidelines on the website for everyone to see.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, if you get to the goal you've got of 100 million women, you've got a big voice in there. How do you think about 28X and its ability to influence that system, not just to operate within it?
Setting a good example for other apps and open source. So if you want to develop a cancer care app or a mental health app, we are happy to share our, it's almost not a database, but our setup, our architecture. Other apps can do the same. That's one thing. So I think more companies like 28X should start to emerge in the next 5 years that say we no longer believe in the old model of subscriptions and data harvesting. Secondly, we are a portal for just general information bases only. Hopefully, just like with Pregnancy Plus, my previous app, women will go to the doctor more prepared. So they say, I've read about endometriosis, these are my symptoms, look what I've logged, and these are the 3 questions I have. So we will give them the questions to go and see a doctor. So we will hopefully improve the self-management, high-level education, reduce period stigma, because women need to learn to talk about what's normal, what's not normal. Very few women at the moment talk to their friends and say, how heavy is your period? The discussion is not there. There's young girls that miss school, they drop out of sports because they are misinformed or they have really, really heavy periods or very painful periods, and they do not know how to talk about that or where to go to. So I don't think we can influence the system at all levels, but we can make a little bit of a dent in self-management, early diagnosis, period stigma, and then the funding, so we can fund research projects. What also we'd love to do is we let people donate their data. So if they say, listen, I'm happy for my data to be used, we offer them like 6 to 8 categories of research projects, and they can select, oh, I really like that research project, I'd like to donate my data. Then we package up their data securely. There's no personal identifiable information with that package. And then we can send that data straight to the research facility.
Now, that's really an interesting model. Do you know if there are other, I'll say health apps, but they don't necessarily have to be health apps, but are there other people kind of using that same donate your data directly into a bit of research model?
Yeah, it does exist, but unfortunately it also gets stored on a server that they own themselves. The problem there is, I always give the example, if you buy something on Amazon, let's say you buy some cutlery on Amazon, for the next 3 weeks, you will get more cutlery served to you in ads and banners wherever you go. You're okay with that. You know that's happening and you're okay with that. More and more women and men are filling in their health questions into platforms like ChatGPT or apps, which get stored somewhere. AI in the future is going to do our pre-recruitment for jobs. The final talk for a long time will still be human, but the pre-recruitment will be done by AI. The same goes for insurance companies. They will vet which people to bring on board in their insurance package. AI will hoover up all this data. You can already test that by typing, what do you know about me in ChatGPT? And you'll find out there's a lot of knowledge. It's a black box AI. You can't really prove what AI knows about you or not. So my question is, who will get the job in the future? The woman who left a lot of cookies and information on these platforms and cloud servers about her mental health, or the one who didn't, the one who's looking to get pregnant, or the one who didn't, who will get a better health insurance, the person who got their cervical cancers articles on that, or the one who didn't, or heavy bleeding. So I believe that we need to be super careful where we give our health data to, because it will be used not always in our advantage in the future. So our environment gives women the power back to control their own data. They can browse any topic within a very safe space, and none of it is stored on cloud servers. There's literally no trace anywhere. And I believe men deserve a similar space, but we're starting with women's health because it was easy to get into. But we should do this everywhere. So that is at the core of a big issue that's coming our way.
That's a really interesting one. This sense of it being more of a movement than a business really comes through. I think the phrase you used was sort of self-manage. The idea of kind of empowerment, if I could use that word, I think really comes through. You mentioned Patients Know Best. That's how we met. I think that's another great example of people doing things that are aimed at helping human beings. I won't even say patients, human beings manage their lives better.
I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Where can I go? How can I connect with the NHS as well? Because we don't have cloud service, it doesn't mean that you can't send your data through a zero knowledge transfer to Patient Knows Best or to your GP. But it's non-identifiable data that gets connected very securely at the back end. And that's at your choice when you decide to send it. The big problem we have is all these apps out there, the health apps I'm talking about, most of them, they say, we need your data to improve our algorithms. That's absolute nonsense. You don't need data of 50 million people. You need data of 1% of your users to improve your algorithm, and then you can update it on the next download of the app. The reason why they want all of that data is for marketing purposes, because that's how they monetize ultimately. And that has to stop. So we will use some of the data for research, we'll use some of the data for improved algorithm, but it's on the choice of the user. Nothing gets by default stored on cloud servers.
Anything else we haven't touched on that you'd like listeners to know about 28X?
We've got 3 pillars. So one is privacy first. Then there is no subscription, so free to use for the user, but also free to the NHS. Everyone goes to the NHS, can I do a pilot? Can you give us some money? We will say to the NHS, here's a great product, it's free, and it's absolutely safe to use. And you don't need to pay. The third pillar is inclusivity. So a lot of these products are always optimized for conversion, and conversion, I mean paying users. So languages like German, English, of course, but French, they're always high on the list of translations because they can sell more subscriptions. Quite often, minority languages are forgotten. So we prioritize, and that's what I mean with inclusivity. We also prioritize all these minority languages because it's super important for people to be able to read in their own language. The same goes for reading levels. Our app you can set to different reading levels. So if you prefer short sentences and smileys and like those emojis, then set the app to that reading level. So it's reading level 8-9 years old. There is no judgment there. If you are dyslexic or you just prefer that reading style, we will give you. So the data is still, the content is still just as clinically validated, but easily written. If you prefer a high reading level with all the correct medical terms, then the app will display that, and you can change it at any time. The same as you can turn off things you don't want to hear about. So if you just had a miscarriage, you might say, please don't show me any content on fertility. Most of these apps, they only say, what are your interests, and show you more, but there's no way where you can block content because they want as many people to read as much content. So it's not in the interest of the user, it's in the interest of the engagement. And I say engagement is great, and I call it addiction because that's what we're trying to do. We get people addicted to content. So we feel the same goes if you're going on platforms like Instagram or Snapchat, you can't say, please don't show me any articles on Trump because maybe you just don't want to hear about him for a week. There's no way where you can turn it off. Why is that? Why can't I decide that I don't want to see any of these? So a lot is about inclusivity, about reading levels, culturally sensitive content, age-appropriate content. A lot of these products are all optimized around just menopause or fertility because that's where money has been made. We also have content for 12-year-old girls and for minority groups. So if you optimize for users rather than for money, you'll get a different product. And I'm not saying we won't make a lot of money. We probably will, and we'll donate that back. But how we solve problems is by asking what would the user want, not what would make the most money.
Yeah. Amber, that's probably actually a great note to end on, something that I suspect some people listening will go, yep, of course, completely agree. And other people might go, how does that work? So I think that's really a great note to end on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing what you're doing with 28X. I wish you really well with it. It sounds like it's going to be very exciting. If somebody wanted to use the app, it sounds like it's not quite available yet. Is there anything they can do to sort of be among the first users?
We have a temporary website called my28x.com. You can pre-register to become one of the first users. I've got a very unusual Dutch name, Amber Vodegel. So find me on LinkedIn, follow me there, and then you will also get updates on when we launch. And if anyone's listening, say, I've got some really senior contacts, or I know how to recommend this within a group of teachers or parents, reach out, because it is a movement and I need every support that possibly that we can get to help make this happen.
Oh, that's fantastic. We'll make sure we put those links into the show notes. So thank you, Amber. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.